Hello, everybody. Hey, welcome back to the History of FEBCO. And this is part 3 of the series of 4. And we're going to be diving into these remote control valves that you see ahead of you. But before we do, I thought we'd check in with Bill with Antique Sprinklers to see what more information he has for us with the history of FEBCO. So let's go to Bill.
All right. So when we left off in part 2, it was 1949. The agreement between Fred Reinecke and John A. Brooks Company had just expired after 25 years, and Fred was ready to strike out on his own. As I mentioned in episode 1, the company he founded at that point, FEBCO, was named for the first initial of each of his kids. And so the F is Fred Jr., the E is Edwin, the B is Bill, and the C is Charlotte. That just leaves the O, and Fred would explain that stood for old man, which was him. And so he'd been working with automatic controllers for a while and valves and things of that nature. And, they were located in Los Angeles still. And their product line had, in terms of sprinklers, primarily sprays. And I've got a FEBCO 240 here. And we might as well take a quick look at what a flush mount fixed spray head looks like when it's operating. And they all pretty much look like that. But they also had automatic controllers, and you're watching Dave in the process of fixing one of those, and valves and backflow prevention devices. They didn't really have much in the way of rotors at that point in time, but they did do some large projects. There was, through, I think, MetLife, there was a property in Los Angeles where they irrigated something like 100 acres of just landscape. Normally you get over 100 acres and you start talking, you're somewhere in the golf market, 100, 200 acres. And then I believe it was up in San Francisco. They had another property where they irrigated the commercial landscape, gardens and turf, about 80 acres, and that's a huge amount of ground to irrigate with just a bunch of small sprinklers when you think about it. And the kids were involved in the business. Ed was president for a while. And in 1962, they moved from Los Angeles to Sun Valley. And they were there for 3 years. And then in 1965, a company called General Sprinkler, that was owned by a guy named James Cosin, purchased them. And the other thing that General Sprinkler owned at the time was a little company called Buckner. And next time, we'll talk about FEBCO when the Reineckes are no longer running it, and what became of it under General Sprinkler, Johns Manville, and some other companies to where they sit today. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dave, where he's going to show you how to repair some very old irrigation equipment, and it's incredibly interesting what he's doing here. So thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, Bill, for all that wonderful information from FEBCO. And let's continue this now with these 2 remote control valves that you see in front of you. The one on the left is the FEBCO number 25 model, and it happens to be in 1.5 inches. And it's a hydraulic control valve. This is probably coming online about in the 1950s, late 1950s into the 60s. And that's the model that they had then. And then here on the right, this is a bigger one. It's a 2-inch FEBCO model 585. And it's a little beast. And we're going to check that out too. And actually I have 3 total of the 585s in 2-inch and 2 of the 1.5 and the number 25s. So let's take a closer look. We'll start with the 585 first. So the 585 series was featured in the 1954 catalog. I know you've seen this catalog before in some other videos, but this is the only place I can find the 585 model. And here it is right here. They actually have a 575, which is a 1 inch, 580, inch and a half, 585 is 2 inch. And they have the 590, which is a 2.5. And they gave all the specifications. And heck, that 2 inch weighed, let's see here, it weighed 14.5 pounds. What a beast. So there is only one public school site where I used to work for that had these, and it was built about in the middle 1950s. And it happened to be on their athletic fields. So probably towards the late of the 1950s, this was discontinued because it is not showing up on the 1960 catalog. So let's take a closer look. So we're going to disassemble this thing. I've already taken the liberty of loosening all this up. These are quite a beast to get apart, and you can only imagine what it'd be like out in the field. There's the lid and the gasket. The gasket is a little dried out and cracked, made out of rubber. And there's a bottom half to this thing, right down here. You had to normally get both ends apart to repair these things. You take that out, and then there's a spring assembly that comes out with it. And it pushed a little piston up inside, and on the top there's a gland up here on the top that would seal the water coming from the control valve through the top here. And this happened to be broken off, the adapter, the 1/8 inch pipe by 1/4 inch compression adapter. And it would fill this chamber up full of water and push the valve open. These valves, I could not get parts for them back in the day. They already had discontinued them back into the 70s. So, however, these valves did last a long, long time when they were still in the field. We probably removed these guys back in the middle to late 1990s. And when these rubbers on the top had were wore out, that was the end of the valves, and that's why these were removed. I've already taken the liberty of loosening everything up, and so we can do the final disassembly. But you can see inside there's a nut that holds the stem assembly in place, and you would have to put some kind of a socket in there to hold it. Then on the top there was this other nut on the top that hold the rest of it together. So that would come off, then this rubber cup would come off. You can see how this is all broken and wore out and dried out. And then to finish getting the whole stem assembly out, take that out of the way. I could just push that out, and then the bottom where the seat is would come out. So you had to work it from both ends at that time, and this is the other rubber part right here. Again, trying to work on these out in the field were a very big challenge at the time. That's probably why they discontinued this model back then. Or they found a different way to build a 2-inch valve, which you'll see in the next half of this remote valve. series. So anyways, so that's kind of that. So I'm going to try and show you here the flow of the water that went through this valve. This is actually the inlet over here on this side. And you can see the little plunger up in there going up and down. According to the directional arrow, we flow through like that. And so you can see in here, when all this is assembled up here, the rubber and the top and everything, the remote control tubing would come through the top up here and connect. And when the water would be forced in here, when the rubber seal was working, we'd go ahead and push this open and let the water flow through, and then on out to the sprinkler heads. So kind of interesting how they designed it back in those days. So, okay. So I'm going to see if we can get this valve to work. And luck would have it, here's the old rubber cup for the top. You can see how bad it is. And like I say, luck would have it, I found another one. And this is actually from a rebuild kit from another manufacturer that used to repair the Moody, I call it the Moody plunger type valves. It was a retro kit. We'll talk about Moody at some other time on another adventure, but this was part of the assembly of the rebuild kit. So I took it apart, and it happens to be an exact match, pretty much an exact match. It's a little bit different on the size. So we're going to put this thing back together and see if this thing will work. So I'm going to give it a shot here. So we'll start with the stem assembly coming up through the bottom. Sorry, my hand's in the way, but there, I can hold that in place. Okay, this plate goes on next. Just like that. And here's the new rubber cup. This kind of just winds right onto the thread. Okay, we got that kind of wound up in there. And now this top goes on. I'll put a little bit of aqua lube on there. This goes on to hold it in place. And got the wrench here to tighten it up with. Oops, I gotta go the other way. There we go. You have to work it from both sides. Yeah, that should be it. Well, that sure looks a lot better. Well, that should do the trick. So we'll find out. Okay. Now we have, put the bottom piece on first. Here is the spring that has to go in there. It's a little helper. And here is the bottom lid. There's no gasket on there or anything. It's just it's like a pipe thread dope, and that's about it. So we can just tighten that up. Okay. Now we'll flip over and put the lid back on. However, in this case, I'm going to have to probably make a new gasket because this one is too old. It's not going to cover correctly and it's going to leak. So let's see if we can make a new gasket. Okay, we got our new gasket made. Pretty crude, but it'll work. Made out of cork. And we'll just put the lid back on. And hopefully that'll do it. And you see the hex head on the top of that lid is pretty well chewed up from over the years. There we go, we're about there. Okay. And finally, we'll remove the old broken threads from the old adapter for the control tubing and put in a new one. Okay, that ought to do it. That completes the repair work on the FEBCO 585. Now we'll take a look at the FEBCO number 25. The FEBCO 25 was the newer one that replaced the 585 series. Oh, interesting here. Controlled rain since 1924. I didn't know FEBCO went back that far. Okay, well anyways, this is a 1960 catalog. And you can see the controllers were new then at the time. The pedestal that we're working with in this series. And they have the FEBCO 25. The 585 is not listed anywhere in the 1960 catalog, so for sure it was discontinued somewhere in the middle to late 50s. All right, let's take a look at the FEBCO 25. You can see here inside of another page of the same catalog the brand new FEBCO 25 and a nice little cutaway section of what the piston looks like internally. And you could get them either in a hydraulic or electric. We are featuring the normally closed hydraulic. You notice someone put a footnote up there. It says C. Buckner. That was getting towards the end of FEBCO's life as we used to know it back then. And I do believe they got absorbed by Buckner or had a partnership with Buckner towards the late 60s, early 70s. So, anyways, among the thousands of installations using FEBCO equipment are the following. And it has a nice listing of all the places that FEBCO was involved with. So out of another parts catalog from FEBCO, you can see the parts explosion for the FEBCO 25. And the cost of the parts at that time, which is back in 1965. And I recognize the little hand scribbles there. It says American Sprinkler, happened to be a vendor at that point in time, and his name was Jerry, the contact person. And I recognize the writing. It's from our old shop guy by the name of John. So, anyways, let's take a closer look now at a FEBCO 25 remote control valve. So one of the remote control valves is a FEBCO number 25. This is a normally closed valve and 1.5 inches. Should be able to work on the setup that I plan on doing. I've already taken a liberty of breaking it loose to take it apart and take a look at it. It still needs to be cleaned up and some new parts be in place, but so you get an idea of what it looks like. There's the internal body, and here is the piston assembly. Yeah, it's pretty cruded up, but there's O-rings in here. This piston moves up and down when everything is working properly, and you can replace the seat washer. Down at the very bottom here, you see a little screen. Internally, there's a little hole that goes through the shaft here that holds this whole assembly together and ends up here. That's when the water bypasses internally up to the top and applies water to the upper chamber to shut itself off when the control water is disconnected and not in use. So when it's on, water coming from the controller pushes water into plates here, and it's actually right here, and pushes it open like so. And then when the water is released from the controller, water pressure bypasses up to the top and then back down it goes. So we're going to clean it up, get all the corrosion out of there, and perhaps some new O-rings if I can find them, and a new seat washer. See what happens. So back in the day when I was still working on these out in the field and repairing them and getting them going again, we used to clean, I used to call it the bell or the outer shell. And I've already started doing this already. But we used to get a little bucket of water and some wet and dry paper, as fine as we can get it, and clean all the corrosion out inside. Polish it as best as we could until it started getting pretty shiny in there. And you just dip it in water to rinse it. Already done most of the work ahead of time. So anyways, that's pretty good. We should be able to get this to work again. This one was corroded pretty good when I took it apart, but I think we'll be okay. Then we move on to the piston, and we'll start by see if we can take this O-ring off so we can clean it up. Sometimes we get lucky enough that we can use the same O-ring over again if it's not too badly worn. And there we go. Hope I don't tear it. So we'll find out. I was digging around in my parts supply for these old valves, and they're getting pretty scarce, so I may have to reuse these O-rings. And I'll show you a little trick of what we can do to get them to operate a little better if they are worn. So that one's pretty good. And I already loosened up this upper plate. I'll try to save this fiber washer. I don't think I have any more. Come on, little rascal. There we go. Thumbnails work great. Then this is the other plate, and there's another O-ring right here. That will clean that up and make sure that it's going to be all right. Doesn't look too bad, actually. And we'll take a closer look at that. Right here is where you'll see there's actually it's a little adjusting flow regulator in here. This is where the water flows from the bottom of the supply line side up to the upper chamber to keep the water on the top of the piston to shut it off. So we should be okay with that. I'll check that. Sometimes I just simply blow air into it and see what happens. And we got it to work. Okay, that works. So I'm just going to finish cleaning up all these pieces and start putting it back together and see what happens. So back in the day, during the reassembly, we used to use this stuff that's called Aquaflow lubricant. And we used to use it in control valves and hydraulic controllers. It really was pretty good stuff. It's a non-greasy type lubricant. And we did all right with it. So I still have some of this stuff. I'm just going to lube up all the vital parts in here and put it back together and see what happens here. So far, it feels perfect. Okay. And then on the upper part, I'm going to put a little wrap of Teflon tape around this, just to help that upper O-ring. And just going to put one thin wrap around in the channel. And that's about all we're going to need. So we'll put the O-ring back in there, the old one. There we go. Whatever little Teflon, we just kind of tuck it in there into the O-ring. And we'll put this assembly back together. Put the friction ring up here on the top. And we'll put that top plate back on. Whoops. There we go. And it was just hand tightened is all it really was. So we'll put a little bit of valve lube on this as well. Very thin amount. Whoops. I gotta remember to keep you in camera here. And also very thin amount into the bell here. Okay. Let's see how this feels. Oh, I think we're going to be just fine. Okay, feels great. And I can tell that it's going to work because I put my hand over the tiny hole that goes in the shaft in the upper chamber. I try to compress it, and I can't do it because my hand is blocking the orifice. If I was to push it down without my hand, it works perfect. All right, I just need to find some gaskets and put it back together. Okay, we actually found some new gaskets here. And they're actually from a different valve manufacturer of all things. And they should be able to work. So we'll put this back together. There we go. Okay, that should do it. So we got the one completed, and actually I have a second one here that I've already gone through. And so we're going to have two of these 1.5-inch FEBCO 25 valves in operation, hopefully, if everything goes well. Okay. Back in the building boom era of the middle 50s all the way up to the middle 60s, the public school system was in a building frenzy of new schools. And we saw lots of these FEBCO valves and the FEBCO controllers being installed mainly in their secondary schools. So there was a whole lot of them that were being installed everywhere. As the years rolled by and they started to age, they required a little bit more maintenance all the time. Getting the rubber components like O-rings and gaskets and seat washers, those are pretty easy to get, but when the brass components started wearing out, it got to be a little tougher because I think FEBCO was starting to downsize, and the parts are getting hard to get. So anytime we took an old valve out, we would cannibalize the parts off of it, like the bell top, the stem assemblies, like I have here, and save the parts to keep the other ones going. That started happening a lot more in the 70s and later on towards the present day. So a little bit interesting stuff going on there. Okay, I think we've reached the end of the line on rebuilding the FEBCO 25s. And there's the last one right there. It's going to join its sisters there of the FEBCO 585s, the 2-inch ones. We got those repaired, rebuilt. Hopefully they're going to work. And along with the other FEBCO 25. And so for the fun of it, I thought I'd throw in this 1.25-inch Moody number 8000 valve. It's normally closed as well. And it has a diaphragm up here on the top, and it's on an angle body. It looks just like that. So it was built probably in the middle 1960s. And here's a nice little breakdown of what it looks like internally. Here's even a globe body that it can screw into, or the angle that we have. And here's the old diaphragm assembly. Let me take this back out again here. And it would look just like that internally. All right, so I thought we'd give it a whirl and have some fun with it as well. We'll talk about Moody a little more on some future episodes of Moody. We won't get too far into it right now, but just for demonstration of our FEBCO, we thought we'd throw this in and have some fun with it. Okay. All those valves are going to be mounted onto this test stand that you've seen so many times in other episodes. And we're going to modify this test stand to accommodate all 6 of these valves. And we'll do that at the conclusion here of part 3. And you'll see them all installed on this test stand at the beginning of part 4. So I look forward to joining you then. And thank you so much for joining me on this long journey of FEBCO. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll see you at part 4.